They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what if the wait takes years? I was only a kid when my world was torn apart by the one person who was supposed to protect me. I couldn't fight back, but I never forgot. And when the moment came, I watched, and I did nothing. You won't believe what happened next. I remember the dress. It was pink, lacy. It had this awful elastic collar that scratched at my neck like it knew something bad was coming. I was in 4th grade, 10 years old. I was supposed to be at school learning about decimals and the water cycle, not standing in the hallway of my grandfather's house, staring at a dress that didn't belong on any child. He said I looked pale that morning. Sighed I should stay home and rest. I didn't feel sick, but when he told my dad I was running a fever, Dad just nodded and headed off to work, tired from another night shift. That was the first part of the trap set with care, laid with fake concern. Then came the dress. He pulled it out from a drawer like it was a birthday present. Said it would cheer me up, that I used to love wearing it. But the dress didn't fit. It was too short. The fabric was stretched too tight across the chest now. My arms were longer, my body different. I'd outgrown it, and something deep inside me screamed that this wasn't about cheering me up at all. I froze. I want to stay in my pajamas, I said quietly. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened. Don't be difficult, he said, pushing it into my hands. It's just a dress. I took it, numb. My feet carried me to the bathroom, and I closed the door, turned the lock, and just stood there. The dress hung from my hands like it was something alive. Something wrong. I stared at it, then at myself in the mirror. 10 years old, hair messy. Pajama shirt with a fading unicorn on it. I didn't look pale. I didn't look sick. But I didn't look safe either. I didn't put it on. I stood there until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore, then came out in my regular clothes. He was sitting on the couch watching some daytime game show. Didn't say a word at first. Just looked at me, slowly, from head to toe. Then he patted his lap and said, "Come sit with your grandpa." My stomach turned. "No, thank you," I said.
He laughed a little. "It's not a question, sweetheart."
"I don't want to," I said again, but my voice cracked this time. His face tightened. The game show kept buzzing in the background, some contestant guessing the price of a blender while I stood in a silent war with this man who smelled like Old Spice and rot. He didn't drag me, didn't raise his voice. He just waited. I sat on the very edge of the couch, as far away as possible, pretending to watch the TV, but I could feel his eyes, and then his hand reaching. Testing, touching. Not like a grandfather, not like anything good. The whole world shrank to the size of a living room that stank of stale smoke and liniment. The clock ticked loud enough to fill my ears. I counted each one to distract myself. Tick, tick, tick. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there, silent, and swallowed my fear like poison. Every second, every breath burned. And all I could think was, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Something inside me hardened. It didn't break. It crystallized, cold and sharp. Because if I broke, then he won. That night I said nothing. Not to my dad, not to anyone. I brushed my teeth. I ate dinner. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling, planning revenge without even knowing what revenge would look like. I was 10, but I wasn't stupid. I knew telling anyone would tear things apart. My dad would kill him, and I'd end up in some stranger's house, lost in the system, so I said nothing, but I waited. I sharpened my silence into a weapon. I buried my rage under straight A's and merit badges. I became the perfect student, the helpful daughter, the Girl Scout who could tie perfect knots and save choking victims. Tick, tick, that moment on the couch never left me. I carried it in my bones, in my breath. And I swore, one day I'll get my moment. I don't know when, but when it comes I'll be ready. I wasn't a very good Girl Scout, because I never planned to save him. I planned to let him fall. I didn't tell anyone. Not my teacher, not my friends, not even my dad, especially not my dad, because I knew what he'd do. I knew that if I ever opened my mouth and told him what his father had done to me, the man would be dead within the hour. And then what? No mom, no relatives to swoop in. Just me in foster care, bouncing from house to house, surrounded by strangers. I'd heard the horror stories. I'd seen the news reports. So I locked it all inside. And the most twisted part? I got good at it. I even won a spelling bee and made it to the regional science fair. I was their golden girl. The one who never caused trouble. I could feel it sometimes, pounding behind my eyes like thunder, but I never let it out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart, the one who always said, please, and thank you. Really good. On the outside, I was everything a parent could want. I smiled, I helped with groceries. I did extra credit. But inside, it was like this storm lived under my skin, rage and shame and disgust, swirling just beneath the surface. Instead, I became calculated. Funny how people push kids to learn how to save lives when no one thinks to teach them how to protect their own. It wasn't obsession, it was preparation. Not violent fantasies, those came later, but quiet ones. Cold ones. I imagined walking away and never coming back. I imagined him choking on his own words. Not to save, to hesitate, to stop. Just for a second, just enough. I imagined looking at him and feeling nothing. I was waiting for something I couldn't name yet. Something that would let me even the scale, because deep down I believed justice doesn't come. You have to make it. What would I say if someone asked me why I didn't act? Could I cry on command? Could I fake confusion? I got really good at acting confused, and I was learning how. At night, I'd lie in bed and picture it. Every give Grandpa a hug moment that made bile rise in my throat. I played the role so well, I almost convinced myself, but I wasn't ready, not yet. So I trained. Girl Scouts, ironically, helped. There I learned CPR, first aid, emergency response. I got a badge for CPR. People stopped seeing me as a kid and started seeing me as responsible. Mature. Like that was a compliment. I still remember the steps. Check responsiveness. Call for help. Chest compressions. Breaths. Over and over we practiced on those rubber torsos, pretending they were people. Pretending we were heroes. And every time I pressed down on that synthetic chest, I imagined doing the same to him. That second could mean everything. I test myself in the mirror sometimes, practicing my poker face. I became a master of pretending. Every family dinner was a performance. Every holiday. It was about the long game. The stare down, the wait. And the moment I stopped being the helpless one, almost, but not quite, it was just another way of saying, you've been through some things, haven't you? Yes, I had. But no one ever asked. He carried himself like he always did, casual and calm, like nothing had ever happened. Like he hadn't stained my childhood with his filth. Like I wasn't still carrying the weight of what he did every single day, and I never told. That memory we shared that no one else in the world was allowed to know about. He grabbed the remote and turned the volume up just a little too loud, but not enough for my dad to wake. That was his usual game. Find the line. Push it without crossing it. Because I still had work to do, my revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't about confrontation or confession. That moment was coming. Like a dog having a nightmare, high-pitched, wet. He coughed once, then again. Harsher this time, and hunched forward, both hands clutching at his chest like he was trying to dig something out from inside. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I'd recognize it when it happened. Until then, I carried my pain like a secret weapon. People thought I was strong. They didn't know I was angry. Really, really angry. The smell hit the air sharp and bitter, and the noise he made, God, I'll never forget that noise. The kind of anger that gets cold over time. The kind that doesn't explode but implodes. The kind that whispers, soon. And so I waited, tick, just a tiny curve of my lips, a smile that said, I see you. Tick. From helping, from jumping in with CPR training and good intentions. The Girl Scout in me had all the tools to try and save him. Me, tick, it started out like any other afternoon. Nothing felt special, nothing felt off. I was in the living room, halfway through my homework, sprawled on the couch with a textbook open and a pencil between my fingers. A real, full-on, chest-crushing, artery-clogging heart attack. Then he walked in. My grandfather. Same faded jeans. Same flannel shirt. Same worn-out slippers. He gave me that look. The one that seemed friendly on the surface, but underneath, there was that same sick glint, that knowing. His fingers twitched like they were reaching for something invisible, like maybe he thought if he grabbed hard enough at the air, he could pull himself back from the edge. I didn't flinch anymore. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I'd grown beyond it. I watched him lower himself into his recliner with a grunt, the leather creaking under his weight. But that day something was different. It started small.
He didn't stir. I knocked again, harder. A shift in his breathing.
A rasp that didn't belong. Then came this weird little whimper. My head snapped toward him. Something instinctual kicked in. He made a gagging sound and leaned forward fast, vomiting into the small trash can beside his chair. It was like every breath he took was a question. Then he looked at me. The face of a man realizing his end was coming. And his fate was sitting right in front of him. Me. I froze, but not out of fear. I sat there on the couch, locked eyes with him and smiled. Not a big smile, not fake or mocking, and I waited. My fingers gripped the edge of the cushion, not because I wanted to move but to stop myself from acting on reflex. But I didn't. I knew what was happening. I'd read the symptoms. Seen the training videos. He was having a heart attack. And every second mattered. But I didn't move. I just watched. His face turned red, then blotchy, then pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Still I sat. Tick, tick, tick. I counted every breath he took. Every one that sounded worse than the last. Until finally he fell forward, unconscious, maybe dead. Only then did I get up. I moved slowly, deliberately, and walked down the hallway to my father's room. I knocked once, soft. "Dad?" I said, voice even. "Grandpa's sick." His eyes opened grudgingly. "What?" "I think something's wrong with Grandpa," I said. The rest happened fast. The paramedics came. They rolled the old man onto a stretcher, worked on him, shocked him, pumped meds into his veins, but I already knew. It was too late. I'd made sure of that. When the ambulance pulled away, my dad followed in his car. I felt clear. Like a fog had lifted, like the balance of the world had been restored. He died later that night. And when the funeral came, I played the role one last time. I cried, fake tears, perfect performance. Oscar-worthy, because deep inside, I wasn't mourning. I was celebrating. I had waited. I had watched. And when the moment came, I didn't save him. I let nature take its course. And that was my revenge. It all unraveled in a matter of minutes, but in my mind that day stretches like slow molasses. Every sound, every twitch, every breath he took felt exaggerated, etched into memory in agonizing, vivid detail. The moment my grandfather started clutching his chest, I knew exactly what was happening. There was no confusion. This wasn't tea indigestion or a panic attack or anything else you could talk your way out of. It was real, a heart attack. He made this awful sound, like a hiccup and a grunt mixed together. His hand went straight to his chest and he bent forward like the pain had just sucker punched him. And for a split second, just a split second, my instincts twitched. Because that's how I was trained, right? Check responsiveness, call for help, begin compressions. Breathe, save, but that twitch, it never became action. Because then he looked up at me, right at me, not around the room. Not searching for help, just me. His face was red and sweaty, lips twitching like he was trying to form words, but there were none. Only sounds, broken, panicked, pathetic sounds. It sounded like begging. A man who had done terrible things now reduced to a puddle of vomit and fear, hoping someone would reach for him. But I didn't. I just sat there, leaned back into the couch, and folded my hands in my lap like I was watching a show. And maybe I was. Because this was it, the climax. The scene I had waited for since that awful day in the living room with the too small dress and the sickening smile. The day he crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't a kid anymore. Not in that moment. I was Justice. He tried to sit up, tried to reach for the end table where he usually kept his blood pressure meds. But his hand missed, and the bottle rolled under the chair. I could have helped him. Could have passed him the bottle. Could have called for my dad. Could have yelled 911. And had an ambulance on the way before the first wave of pain was done rolling through him. But I didn't. Instead, I did what he once did to me. I watched. Unblinking. Cold. He leaned forward, coughing and gasping and gurgling into that cheap plastic trash can, chunks of half-digested food mixing with bile. The smell hit the air thick and sour, but I didn't move. I barely blinked. Every now and then, his eyes would flick up at me again like he was checking, like he was waiting for me to break. I didn't. That's when his strength started to drain. You could see it happen like someone pulled the plug on his power. His arms dropped. His breathing got slower. His face, red with strain, started to go pale, then gray. It was happening. For real, he was dying, right in front of me. I slid a little closer on the couch, just a few inches. Enough so he could really see me. I wanted him to remember the look on my face, the calm, the clarity. I wasn't crying, I wasn't panicking. I wasn't confused. I was smiling. He didn't deserve mercy. He didn't deserve kindness. What he deserved, what he got, was silence. The same silence he forced on me years ago. Tick, tick, tick. I counted. Every second mattered in a heart attack. I knew that from my Girl Scout CPR training. You have about 4 to 6 minutes before serious brain damage begins. After 10 minutes without intervention, survival drops dramatically. So I waited. Not 5 seconds. Not 30 minutes. He reached out one last time, his fingers twitching like they were trying to form words of their own. Like maybe he thought if he could just touch me, just connect, it would be enough. I leaned in slightly, enough so he could hear me. You remember what you did, I whispered. His eyes widened. And then he collapsed. His body slumped like a string had been cut. One arm dangled off the recliner. His mouth hung open, loose and grotesque. I stood up slowly. Time to act, but only now. Only once I was certain. I walked down the hallway with calm, measured steps. Knocked on my dad's bedroom door like I was asking for help with a homework problem. Dad? I said, loud enough to wake him. Something's wrong with Grandpa. He was up instantly. Half-dressed, eyes wide with panic, he raced down the hall and into the living room. I followed slowly. I already knew what he'd find. He knelt beside his father, shouting, shaking him, calling his name. I hovered in the doorway. My dad's voice cracked. Call 911. Now. I nodded and picked up the phone, dialed, spoke calmly. There's a medical emergency, my grandfather, he collapsed. I think he had a heart attack. The dispatcher stayed on the line, but it was all going through the motions now. I already knew the ending. When the paramedics arrived, they took over. Tried to revive him, shouted orders, moved fast, but nothing worked. My dad asked me to go next door while they followed the ambulance. The neighbors smiled and gave me a blanket and cookies. Told me I was so brave and so strong. And all I could do was nod and say, I hope he's okay. Because that's what the good granddaughter would say. That's the line I had practiced in my head for years. The ambulance never came back. Later that night, Dad returned home, eyes red, face pale. He's gone, he said. I hugged him, held him tight. Even faked a sob. Played the part so well I almost convinced myself I felt something other than peace. But I didn't. I went to the funeral, stood in front of a box of ashes, and gave a little speech about love and loss and memories. Everyone cried. I didn't. I watched. And I remembered. I remembered the dress. The couch, the smile, the vomit, the moment. And I knew. This was my justice. Not loud. Not violent, but final. I had waited. And when the moment came, I let the clock run out. Time is strange when someone's dying. People think it races by, that everything blurs into chaos and panic. But for me, it slowed down, stretched out. Every second felt like an hour. Every blink lasted a lifetime. The world didn't fall apart. It held its breath. And so did I. Those minutes, those long, surreal, terrible minutes while my grandfather was dying in front of me felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and refusing to step back. I was suspended in silence, in power, in control for the first time in my life. And I wasn't letting go. He was slumped in his recliner, hands still clutching at his chest, face slick with sweat. His breathing sounded like water in a broken pipe rattling, irregular, fading. But I wasn't afraid. I was calm, steady, my heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. Because for once I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the one being cornered or touched or violated. I was the one who chose. And I chose silence. I remember the clock ticking. Literally ticking. There was this old wall clock above the TV, gold-rimmed, battery-operated, with a soft click every second. I had counted that sound for years whenever I couldn't sleep after one of his accidental brushes against me. That sound was my lullaby when I wanted to scream into my pillow. Now, it was my countdown. Tick, tick, tick. Each second that passed, I calculated what was happening inside his body. Oxygen deprivation, heart tissue dying, blood flow collapsing. Girl Scouts had given me a badge in CPR. Sure, but they also gave me enough medical insight to understand just how fast a person slips away when the blood, dose, and T move where it needs to. I knew what I was watching. And I knew the precise moment it crossed the line between maybe savable and point of no return. But I kept sitting. There was this eerie stillness in the room. TV still playing some old western where the hero always saves the day, always rushes in, always does the right thing. But I wasn't the hero. And this wasn't his story. It was mine.
He wheezed again, this awful, desperate sound like a balloon deflating. His legs twitched.
His face was draining of color, first red, then pale, then this weird bluish tint around the lips. I wondered if it hurt. Part of me hoped it did. Is that a cruel thing to think? Maybe, but then again, maybe not. Because this wasn't just about pain. It was about balance. About the universe righting a wrong. He had taken something from me that I would never get back: my childhood, my innocence, my sense of safety in the world. He had made me grow up fast, taught me to be afraid, taught me to hide, and now he was learning what it felt like to be powerless, to reach out and have no one come, to beg without words and be met with silence. And I wanted him to know before it ended. I wanted him to feel it deep in his bones. I saw him, I remembered, and I wasn't going to save him.
He made a soft, choking noise, then slumped deeper into the chair. His eyes rolled slightly.
For a moment I thought he had passed. I leaned forward, not to help, just to check. He blinked, barely, a small, frightened, fluttering movement. He was still there, still conscious enough to know what was happening. I whispered, so soft it was almost a breath, "You don't get to die easy." His eyes widened, a flicker of understanding slicing through the fog. Good, that's what I wanted. I stood up slowly, walked to the hallway, then paused, waited another full minute. 60 whole seconds, I counted every one, and then I moved. I tapped lightly on my dad's door. He didn't answer right away, so I tapped again louder. "Dad?" I said. "Grandpa's acting weird." My voice was steady, calm, just enough urgency to sound real, but not enough to trigger immediate panic. He got up fast, rubbing his eyes, already half-dressed. "What's going on?" "I think he's sick," I said, backing away down the hall. He rushed past me into the living room and gasped. I stayed back, leaning against the wall like some background extra in a hospital drama. I watched him kneel, shaking his father, calling his name. I watched him fumble for the phone and scream into it. "I need an ambulance." I watched the tears form in his eyes as he begged the unconscious man to breathe. And I waited, just like before. Only now the performance wasn't mine. It was his. The helplessness, the panic, the desperation. The same feelings I had once swallowed down like poison, year after year, with no one to tell, no one to protect me. Now he was feeling them. And I couldn't tell him the truth, because I loved my dad. I really did, and if he had known what his father did to me, he would have killed the man long before this day ever came. I didn't tell him back then because I didn't want to lose him. And I wouldn't tell him now because I didn't want to break him. He already thought he failed. If he knew the real story, it would destroy him, so I stayed silent. Even as the sirens wailed in the distance. Even as the paramedics stormed in and tried to restart a heart that I had already let stop. Even as they looked at each other with tight lips and subtle headshakes, the unspoken code of, "It is too late," I watched. And I knew this was my moment. These were the longest minutes of my life, not because I was afraid, but because I had never felt so powerful. And I knew I would never feel that kind of power again. The call was official. "He's gone," they said. It wasn't a dramatic line from a movie, no cold hands gently folded. No last whispered words. Just a flat voice on the other end of the phone, confirming what I already knew. My grandfather was dead. And all I had to do now was lie. Not to hide a murder because I didn't kill him. I didn't touch him. I didn't inject anything or twist the knife. I just waited, and that's the part that people wouldn't understand. Silence isn't violence, but sometimes it's justice.
He didn't cry right away. He just stood there, stunned, hollow.
My dad stood in the middle of the kitchen, phone still in his hand, the weight of loss pulling him into himself, like he couldn't stand up straight. And me? I hugged him, arms around his middle, cheek against his chest, and I whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." It was a strange moment because for once I wasn't acting. I was sorry, not for the death, not for the silence, but for what this moment would cost him. He lost his father that night. But he had already lost the man he thought his father was a long time ago. He just didn't know it yet, but it was chaos. Phone calls, florists, photo collages, finding a suit for Dad, finding something black for me. The funeral came fast, too fast. I always thought funerals were these carefully planned events, quiet music, tearful speeches, neat rows of solemn guests. No one asked how I was doing, they just assumed. She was so close to him, she's probably devastated. Poor thing, she must be in shock, and I let them believe it. Every hug I got, I returned. Every sympathetic smile I mirrored. Every question I answered with just enough sadness to satisfy without inviting more. I played the part beautifully. Because that's what survivors do. We adapt. I stood next to his photo, a smiling gray-haired man with crow's feet and an air of warm wisdom, a lie in a frame. That picture sat atop a box of ashes, surrounded by roses and forget-me-nots. People gave speeches. Dad spoke about the man who taught him to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to be tough. And I'll miss him every day. He wiped tears and smiled at the memories. And I stood beside him like a good daughter. Like a good granddaughter. I even spoke. Let my hands shake slightly. Let my eyes well up until one perfect tear rolled down my cheek. I don't remember everything I said, but it went something like this. He taught me how to make grilled cheese. He used to sneak me candy when Dad wasn't looking. He called me his sunshine. People cried. I didn't, not really. I just let my voice crack at the right moment. It was theater, it was also for the girl he broke. For the childhood I never got back. For the silence I buried so deep it grew roots. But to them, it was grief. They never knew I was mourning something entirely different. People stood in small circles telling warm stories about a man they thought they knew. Not a person. A part of myself. Because as much as that funeral was for him, and this was the burial, the final act. After the ceremony, we had food. Casseroles, cold ham, sweet tea. I kept quiet. Let them believe what they needed to. Let my dad believe his father had a peaceful end. Let the neighbors believe I was heartbroken. I wasn't about to destroy everyone's idea of what had happened. Because the truth, it wouldn't set me free. It would just ruin people who didn't deserve to be ruined. Especially Dad, he'd never forgive himself. He'd wonder why he didn't see it. Why I never told him. Why he let the monster live under our roof. And that guilt would kill him in a slower, crueler way than any heart attack ever could. So I lied to protect him. I could still hear the echo of his recliner creaking, even though it had been hauled away. The silence felt different now. To protect me, and in a way to protect the moment. Because that moment, those minutes when I watched a man rot from the inside out and did absolutely nothing, that was mine. My justice. My closure, it didn't need validation. It didn't need applause. It just needed to stay mine, forever. Later that night, after the guests left and the house was quiet again, I stood in the doorway of my room and looked out into the dark hallway. Cleaner, I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling. Same one I'd stared at for years, haunted by guilt and fear and unanswered questions. But that night, I felt nothing. No fear, no rage. Just stillness. The kind that comes when a storm finally dies down and the air smells like rain and relief. I closed my eyes, and I slept. Really slept. For the first time in years. People always say secrets eat you alive. That they fester and twist inside until you rot from the guilt of keeping them. But not all secrets are poison. Some are armor, some are survival. Mine was both. I never told my dad the truth, not because I didn't trust him, but because I did. Too much. He loved me, fiercely. He would have moved mountains for me, bled for me, burned everything to the ground to protect me. And that's exactly why I stayed quiet. Because if I told him, he would have killed the man, And then what? He would have gone to prison. I would have ended up a ward of the state, packed into a system that chews kids up and spits them out broken. No aunts, no uncles. No safety net. Just the unknown, so I carried the secret instead. It wasn't a burden at first. It was a mission, a plan. And when I got what I wanted, when my grandfather died with my smile etched into his final memory, I thought the weight would vanish. But it didn't. It just changed. What used to be rage became silence. What used to be fire became a cold kind of emptiness. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired of pretending, tired of smiling. Tired of being the girl who always had it together when inside I was held together by duct tape and willpower, but I never cracked. Not in front of anyone, because my secret? It wasn't just about what happened. It was about who I became because of it. I was no longer just the victim. I was the witness, the judge, the executioner. And yet, that secret protected me. It kept me safe. It gave me a sense of power in a world that once made me feel powerless. Even now, decades later, I still live with it. Still sleep with it curled up next to me like a shadow. But I don't regret it. Because survival isn't always clean. Sometimes it's jagged, messy, ugly, and that's okay. Because I survived. I made choices that others might never understand, but they weren't for them. They were for me, to stay whole, to stay sane. To stay here, and sometimes that's enough. People talk about justice like it's this noble thing, clean, official, like it wears a black robe and swings a gavel and delivers neat moral conclusions, guilty or not guilty, right or wrong, case closed. But real justice, it's nothing like that. It's messy, it's quiet, and sometimes it looks a hell of a lot like revenge. What I did wasn't legal justice. There were no cops, no confessions, no trials. I didn't report him, didn't put him behind bars. Didn't watch him get sentenced and shackled and dragged away. That's the kind of justice movies are made of. My justice was quieter, darker, more deliberate. It looked like a 10-year-old sitting on a couch, waiting for a monster to choke on his last breath. It looked like a smile instead of CPR, a silence instead of a scream. It was calculated, intentional, and it worked. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. I expected triumph. Some great sense of relief or satisfaction. I thought maybe I'd feel free. But what I felt was complicated. Not guilt. I want to be clear about that. I don't feel guilty. I didn't cause his heart attack. I didn't poison him or push him. I just let nature take its course. But I also didn't help. And that choice, the deliberate, ice-cold decision to do nothing, is the part that sticks with me. Because justice, when it's yours to define, doesn't come with applause. It doesn't even come with peace, not always. Sometimes it just comes with silence. A long, echoing silence where you have to sit with what you did and what you didn't do, and decide if you can live with it. I can, but that doesn't mean it was easy. Justice, real justice, asks a lot of you. It asks if you can carry the truth alone. If you can accept that no one else may ever understand. If you can love yourself not despite what you did, but because of it. Because you chose survival. Because you protected yourself in the only way you knew how? Because you refused to let your pain be erased or dismissed. People like to believe in a justice system, a structure, a process. But what about when that system doesn't work? What about when speaking out would destroy your family, leave you homeless, throw you into chaos? What about when staying silent is the only way to survive? That's when justice becomes something you build for yourself, in secret, in shadow, with teeth. It's not the kind you write songs about. It's not the kind you bring into the light, but it's real. And sometimes it's the only kind you get. I used to ask myself if I'd made the right choice. If letting him die without lifting a finger made me just as bad. But then I remember the girl I used to be. The one who sat on that couch years earlier, smaller and scared, fighting back tears and bile, trying to figure out why someone she trusted could hurt her like that. I remember how powerless she felt. How violated. How alone. And I know without hesitation I did what that girl needed. I gave her back her power. No courtroom verdict could have done that. No public reckoning. No apology, just that moment. Those minutes. Where I watched the man who tried to break me fall apart and did nothing to save him. That was my justice. And it was enough. For the longest time, I never thought I'd speak these words out loud, not to anyone. Because my silence wasn't just protection, it was control. The only part of the story I owned entirely. The only piece no one could twist or pity or pick apart. But something changed. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was the way trauma doesn't rot, it evolves. It curls in your gut like smoke, shifting into something new when you least expect it. I'd spent so long holding the secret tight, I forgot what it felt like to just breathe. And then one day I did. It started as a journal entry, just a line, then a paragraph, then pages. And suddenly my story was on paper, real, visible, alive. It terrified me. But it also freed me. Because for so long, that story had defined me. Even when no one knew it, it shaped how I moved through the world, how I looked at men, how I flinched at loud voices, how I kept one foot out the door in every relationship, just in case. I never got to be a child. Not really. Not after him. And now, decades later, I finally get to say that out loud. He molested me. He stole something from me, and I let him die. That truth doesn't scare me anymore. It strengthens me. Because I've realized this isn't a story about him. About how I held onto my sanity, my worth, and my power in a house built on secrets. It never was. This is about me, about how I survived. About how I fought without fists. There are thousands of us. Too many to count. People walking around every day, smiling through jobs and families and holidays, while carrying scars they've never shown anyone. If that's you, I see you. I know the silence. I know the weight. And I know how heavy it feels to carry a truth that would change everything if you ever let it out. But here's the thing, you don't owe your story to anyone. You don't have to bleed in public to prove you were wounded. But if one day you want to speak, know that you can. And that when you take back what was stolen, word by word, breath by breath. That's what I'm doing now. Not because I need forgiveness, not because I want applause, but because I finally understand something simple and undeniable. My story matters. Even if it makes people uncomfortable. Even if it doesn't end with a court case or a jail sentence or a neat little moral. It ends with me, alive, healing, free, no sentence, no apology, and that is enough. So that's my story. Not a fairy tale, not a courtroom drama. Just truth, raw and mine. I didn't get justice the way people expect. There was no judge, but I got something better. I got control.